This is Planning for the Future, the podcast.
Welcome to the show. We're sitting here with J. Barry Watts of SavingYouTaxes.com. So, Barry, you describe yourself as a tax strategist and a retirement designer. What does that mean?
Well, I thought it meant just what we labeled it to be. What we do is we help people in two ways. First of all, we help business owners often with tax strategy issues because people are paying a lot more taxes than they need to, and taxes are set to go up in the years that are ahead. In fact, you may or may not be aware that our next tax increase has already been passed by Congress and goes into effect in about 5 more years. So we need to be cognizant of that because we're going to pay more and more taxes on all that money we've been stuffing away into IRA accounts. Secondly, we then work in the retirement design area because if you save money on taxes, that's money that you can then direct to your own retirement plans. And people, spend all their working life, 40 years, putting money away, but they really don't have any idea what to do with it once they've reached the retirement point and how to start accessing that money and what the smart way is to draw it down. And so we help them design plans that will facilitate income for the rest of their life. We plan them usually to age 100.
Right. And so, and being a retirement designer, you take everybody's situation is different, obviously. So you go ahead and put something specifically for that person. It's nothing cookie cutter.
No two plans are the same. Some people need to retire now at 62 and start taking Social Security. Some people need to retire now at 62 but not touch their Social Security until they're 70. And some people want to work all the way to 70 and not take their Social Security until then. Some spouses are able to draw Social Security sooner than the higher earning spouse. So the point is, everyone's situation is different. Some people have got big inheritances. Some people receive none. Some people started late in life and didn't begin to accumulate money until they were 50 years old. Other people were saving, and by the time they were 50, they were ready to retire. So every situation and circumstance is different. There are marriages, mixed marriages, multiple kids, his, hers, and ours. And how you wire all that together to facilitate the retirement and then to pass it on to the next generation and legacy is critical. And you've got to spend a lot of time thinking and designing the architecture on that in order for it to go down the way you wanted it to.
Absolutely. And the way that long-term care planning has changed over the years now, just even recently in the last 5 to 7 years, it's changed so much with the asset-based long-term care planning. It's not that use it or lose it type situation that it used to be.
Well, a quarter of a century ago, we used traditional long-term care insurance kinds of products. But while we were doing that, we were also planning people in retirement to only live to about age 73 or age 74. And if they lived longer than that, well, it was their own darn fault. And so what's happened is those traditional long-term care products that used to pay out well at that time, now insurance companies are looking at it and saying, oh my goodness, this person may live to be 100 years old. And they may be in long-term care for as long as 10 years. And the cost of that is causing insurance companies to really struggle. Therefore, the insurance companies have had to adapt in how they present long-term care products. And so the long-term care that your parents or grandparents owned is drastically different than the kind of long-term care tools that we use today to deal with that problem that 70% of the population is going to face.
Right. And you can use that money in different ways. With the long-term care planning now, if you've got something that you need in your immediate future and you want to use some of that money, you've got your immediate future, your short-term future, and then your long-term future. You can adjust what you're doing through that, right?
Well, long-term care designing, once again, we're back to that term, can come in various forms and functions that will do several different things for you. Number one, it'll provide you tax-free income if you never need long-term care or choose to never use that income for long-term care. But it can also provide you tax-free income for long-term care, not just long-term care, but for what is called chronic illness. And that's a slight little differentiation, but that makes a lot of difference. In the industry, the term long-term care really refers to being in a facility, a nursing home, whereas chronic illness refers to being at your home but needing some help. And so there are different types of products. Some of them will only pay if you're in a facility. Some of them will pay if you're in your home and you just need someone to come in and help you with bathing or toileting or transferring or continence issues or sorting your medicines and even cooking your food and cleaning. And so you've got a wide variety of applications for these different products depending on what you think your needs will be.
That's a great point. It's a great description. That's one of the best descriptions I've heard of, that is how it breaks down. Again, the way that the things have changed, the options are out there, but you also have more freedom with the way you go about designing those plans.
Well, flexibility is what's very important. If you don't plan, you're not going to have any flexibility. You're going to take whatever comes to you. And for most people, that means that they wind up spending down their assets much more rapidly than they anticipated. I just had a case yesterday in my office that was really interesting. A retiring business owner and his wife, a retired teacher. Now, as long as the business owner is there, everything's going to be fine because he's got a rather healthy pension check, but it'll only come to him during his lifetime. So let's say that he gets sick. And he's sick for 4 years, and he spends a lot of the family's wealth on his own illness and his care. Then he dies. Well, not only does the wife lose his pension, but she's going to have spent all the money taking care of him during his illness, and now when she's left alone, she's living on less money, and she doesn't have as much wealth to provide for all the other things she needs. So a real simple solution to that was brought to the table and protected all of their wealth. So if he spends all the money in a nursing home, he won't spend all of that money. It'll be other money because we used a very specific chronic illness and long-term care kind of product to protect her wealth in the event he dies first.
Wow. That's another great story. I love hearing stuff like that. And it's about that problem solving for each person. And because you do design, it definitely, really speaks to how you can work with a problem. Whatever the problem is, you can design something that'll fit what they need. And that's a great way to go about it. I like that. This is more unique than what you see a lot of people doing. A lot of people, they like to go in, they'll do that, like they may call it the financial MRI and come in and put together a plan. But to really, truly go about everything holistically like you're doing seems pretty unique.
Well, if you were going to give someone a financial MRI and you didn't deal with an eventuality that has a 70% chance of occurring, which is a long-term healthcare event, then I would submit that you committed malpractice. And so if you're going to do this the right way, not only do you have to deal with the money and the spending throughout retirement, but you've got to deal with the taxes, and that is the tax strategy side of our firm. And you've got to deal with the other eventualities which may occur, one of which is long-term care, one of which is death. And after death, of course, we have to deal with the legacy and the estate plan. And in dealing with the estate plan, you have to deal with what I call the in-laws and the outlaws. And you know what happens? A lot of times you have an in-law and you discover they're an outlaw later.
Yes.
And that is a real problem. And if you're not careful, the outlaw winds up taking money that you intended to go to your child, but they wound up having to split it with the outlaw. So all of this is remediable. But you have to sit down at the table and do the hard work. Now, we know that people don't know how to do the hard work because they don't do this every day. This is what we do every day.
Right.
So if they'll just sit down at the table and answer the hard questions that we ask, then we can design a plan for them that will resolve the problems that might be contingent and might occur at some point in the future. And we've got a backstop then set up for whatever comes down the pipeline.
Yeah, that's a great point, like what you said with the in-laws and the outlaws. I'm the youngest of 9, so there's a lot of in-laws.
That means your inheritance was small.
My inheritance, yes, it was very small, but that's okay.
Yeah,
you had
a great life and a great family.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we look at my mom, so the difference is now that my dad passed when I was very young, but my mom was 9
kids
the
by
one that was
herself.
there.
That's tough.
The difference between me and the next closest to me is 9 years.
Wow.
So my oldest brother was 21 years old.
So it was you and Mom at home.
Pretty much. I like to say if I ever wrote a book, it would be called The Only Child of 9.
That's a good title.
Right,
that,
right. Yeah, because I grew up with all these brothers and sisters, but I was also really kind of an only child at the same time.
Sure.
So it was mom and I for
And
a
all the
long
brothers
time.
and sisters call you baby, mama's baby.
Oh, absolutely.
They think mama prefers you. And you just look at them and say, yeah, it's true, she does.
It is. It was pretty. There's two of us that are the favorites. I know it. I've got one sister who's blind, and who's just amazing. Has been so self-sufficient in the things that she's done, travels the world, all these things. So my mom has always been very proud of her. But then all my brothers and sisters were always like, "You're the baby. You're so spoiled. You're spoiled."
Take it.
I was.
Yeah, it's great.
The difference is there was 8 of you in the house when all this stuff was going on. I got new shoes because we could afford new shoes. When I was there, we weren't paying for 8 other people being in the house.
So the thing to think about is with 9 kids like that is when mom needs care, who provides the care? Now, with that many children, there may still be someone around.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes, as is the case with my clients yesterday, my clients were in Missouri. They have 1 child in Tennessee and 1 child in North Dakota. And so when they need long-term care, who's going to provide for them?
Exactly.
There's not anybody to even come to the hospital when they have a crisis.
Right.
And so we have to provide for that financially so that we can buy help. We have to factor in who's going to die first. Typically, it's the man. And if the man and wife are about the same age, typically she will outlive him by about 7 years. Now, you have a case where there's a 15-year difference in age. He's already 15 years older than her.
Sure.
And he dies, and then she lives 7 years longer than him. We just have a 21-year time span that we have to solve for. That's half of a working career. So back to the idea of this being architecture and design, that's where all of this has to come together to figure out those kinds of things. And to answer with regard to long-term care, the simple question, who's going to take care of mom or dad when the time comes? And if we're all in different places fighting different battles, maybe we don't have time to be there bathing and toileting and cooking and cleaning and sorting pills. Somebody's got to do it, and one of the ways to solve the problem is with extra money.
Absolutely. And, there was a statistic that I read that say, a lot of times you're going to have somebody come in and say, well, my daughter's going to take care of me, if anything happens. That's my plan.
Well, is that a burden you really want to put on
Is
her?
that a burden you want to put on them?
You want your daughter changing your diaper? I'm just asking.
Helping you off the toilet, things like that. And B, the amount of money that your daughter is going to incur is in $100,000 a year because, if
the amount of money she could lose because she's not able to go to work because she's taking care of you.
Right. And modifications to the home if that need to be. There's a lot of factors that go into that. And you don't see the multi-generational households here like you used to. Now people are moving all over the state. May they be in Florida. Maybe you're the person who's moved down to Florida and your kids are still all over the place. Being that there's 9 of us, we have some in California, we have some in New Mexico,
Sure.
we have some in Chicago, we have some down here in St. Louis. But fortunately, there were still some up in Chicago to help with my mom, but she wound up going into a facility near the end of her life as well.
Where I first learned about that, interestingly enough, I had never paid any attention to it until over 25 years ago. My wife and I were in Switzerland, in an area of Switzerland called Emmental Valley. Emmental is what it's called. Beautiful, a delicious place to visit. We had a wonderful time there. And what we noticed is that every one of the farms, that's the farming region of Switzerland, every one of the farms had this huge house barn. It was all under one roof. The house was on the front end and the barn was on the back end. And out back, there was a little bitty house. And the little bitty house out back is where Grandma and Grandpa moved to when the oldest son took over the farm and moved his family into the big house.
Right.
So multiple generations were being cared for. I grew up in a very small town of I was actually outside the town, but the town had about 300 people on the farm in rural southwest Missouri. And so, everybody knew everybody. Everybody was half related to everybody. And you had cousins, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, kids, and grandkids all fairly close by, so everybody could take care of everybody. But with the advent of the interstate highway system,
absolutely,
and the fact that suddenly you can travel and see the world and decide there are other parts of the world you'd rather live in. Look at my kids. I've got one in Indianapolis and one in St. Louis, while I live in Springfield, Missouri, 3 hours away from St. Louis and 7 or 8 hours from Indy.
And if your daughter were, even if you were in a facility, It's hard for your daughter to come down 3 hours just to even visit you, let alone to help take care of you.
She's trying to make a living.
Right.
So the way to solve that problem, if you can, is financially. And it's not going to solve all the problems, but if you can pay the bills and buy the kind of care that you want that satisfies that particular need, then it frees your family up so that when they're coming to see you, they're not having to focus on cleaning. They're not having to focus on cleaning you, bathing you, preparing you. They can instead enjoy you, visit with you, maybe take you out to dinner or something like that, and still have a quality of life with you that is